Broadcasting right here in Métis Media Radio. I'm your host, Mike Clouds. So let's focus on Indigenous people, colonialism, and how global governments are trying to make things right. Or how colonialism is picking up its pace. At this point, where I'll be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure. But Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, he on August 6th, he had a summit with the Métis Nation, and at that meeting were the Métis Nation of Alberta, Métis Nation of Saskatchewan, Métis Nation of Ontario, who decided to send their regrets and not show up, where the Manitoba Métis Federation, and their reasoning has to do with a lot about legitimizing projects that Bill C-5 wants to put across. And to be totally honest with you, in my opinion, that the Bill C-5 shouldn't have been legitimized without input from all of First Nations or Indigenous people. That as the original caretakers of the land that these colonies were actually built on, that the idea of taking care of the land should be left to the Indigenous people, the original caretakers, the ones whose heritage leads back to the land, leads back thousands of years to caring for the land itself. Because let's look at a couple of things here if we look at the track record of the colonization of every Indigenous place around the world, we see some sort of path of blood and destruction. And that type of destruction continues. That that in British Columbia, that the Site C is completely ready to come online, and the ecological disaster that it caused to build this super dam, it's outstanding. The pipelines that Alberta wants to build across caribou runs that will destroy the environment, and for progress to collect more money. The thing is that colonialism was built first on collecting more money. It was built on greed and capturing resources of a land without respect for that land. Capturing resources under the attitude of, well, they're primitive people. They don't know what they have. And that's the story that has been told, that when the first settlers from Europe came to North America, that they were nothing but savages. And I'm going to apply some of this to what we're seeing in Gaza also, because the Indigenous people, the Palestinian people who are being forced off of their land in Palestine, look, I'm setting aside the wrongdoings of the Hamas because they don't represent all of the people. They represent a very small portion of the people in Palestine, the Palestinian people. But that land goes, the people that are on, the families that are on that land goes back thousands of years, even before we start talking about Jesus Christ walking there. That land goes back to, if we're going to go with the Bible, it goes back to the beginning of it. And those are the people who were those. Those families were the people who were there. And at this point, they're trying to change the narrative to thinking that they aren't the people whose families were originally there, that there was other people that were supposed to be there before they were. And that's simply not the truth. That they're trying to force the original caretakers of that land off of there so that it can be used for monetary gain. And that's the basis of how the colonies in North America were started and how they changed the narrative so that we are led to believe that the First Nations people were too primitive to have traveled to Africa, but there's records that show that they did. That there were no built up towns. People were just simply living in either mud huts or tents. That there was no architecture, that there was no real culture. That had to be handed to these poor, lowly people by the Europeans. Again, not true. That is a false narrative, and the narrative is that the Europeans came, saw that they wanted something, and they tore down the civilizations that they found. They burnt people's homes to the ground and committed general acts of genocide in order for us to see what we have now. Now we're talking about infrastructure projects that Bill C-5 will push through that will interrupt wildlife runs, that will interrupt streams, fish, other lives that are not human will be interrupted so that us as human beings can make an extra $1. And the Indigenous people who want to slow that down so that the projects can be planned better as opposed to just ripping through. And planning and time taking is more essential than just reaping a bunch of dollars. Protecting all of the lives that are across Canada is more important than a few dollars in a pocket. So, along with that, we're going to hear also today from the International Maritime Organization as they're talking about maritime security, especially around the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal is also the site, especially on the Pacific side of it, of a lot of piracy and insecurity for shipments that go back and forth through there. And they would like to see more secure means happen in order to protect the people. We're also going to hear more about Palestine as we hear from the Palestinian representative to the United Nations, as he is joined with other Arabic countries that want to see the Palestinian people achieve a two-state solution, a shared solution to Palestine, so that the Indigenous people whose families go back thousands and thousands of years can live in peace with the new families that want to move there from Europe, and so that they all can heal and survive and build a great land together that will respect all of the cultures, all of the religious beliefs, and more than ever, a peaceful place of respect for all to revere. So we'll move forward, and we'll hear from Mark Carney, and then move forward on to other issues.